Hello and welcome to Unacademy. As part of your Hindu analysis today, we'll be discussing 5 to 6 important articles out of the Hindu newspaper. But before we begin, an important announcement for you that the 24,999 offer is going to end on 12th of October. So the window of opportunity is for the next 2 days, and if you ever considered our course or any form of guidance, this is the right time. More than that, in the description box, there is a link to a form which is for counseling. If any of you have any doubts with regards to UPSC, how to take the course, or what is the larger structure of the course itself, you can fill that form. There will be a one-to-one counseling session which will be organized. You can find the link in the description box for the same. Same is true for also the SIP which we run, which is the Success in Prelims program. You can also give the test there. The Telegram channel is also available there. So therefore, you can like, share and subscribe to the channel to be fully prepared for this examination. With this, let's look at the 6 topics we are going to cover. The first one is that today is 10th of October is World Mental Health Day, and therefore there was an editorial on the thematic and something quite important for both GS paper 3 and 4 related to ethics, what is the definition of happiness, and the ideas related to what is mental health and how can we come out of the epidemic we are in. Then something which happened significantly yesterday, which was Samsung workers, at least 6 to 7 got arrested yesterday. So there's a text and context article on what is the main issue there. Thereafter, the MPC met, the Monetary Policy Committee met, and they've changed their stance. We'll discuss what this stance means with regards to accommodative, neutral and hawkish. Thereafter, 3 interesting and small developments, which is one, we have got a cabinet committee approval on the MQ-9B drones, and also there are certain submarines which will be added to our arsenal. Then the Nobel Prize in Chemistry yesterday was about physics and neural networks, and last but not the least, the H5N1 virus which is spreading like wildfire in poultry and in mammals across the world, and Australia and New Zealand are the only sector which has not been touched. We will discuss what are the implications, how is it transmitted. So we have 6 articles dealing with GS paper 3, 4, some related to prelims specifically, and we will, the same way we've been doing since the past 2 to 3 days, divide every topic into 5 to 6 what we call as structures or parts which we can discuss separately. So first, let's discuss mental health in India's material world. Now, this article came in tandem with one more, which is the first and the second editorial were about mental health, but this one is more relevant for you because the other one is more about corporate mentality and corporate culture, which is of no purpose to a UPSC aspirant. But rather this one is important because it has the concept of happiness and the ethical issues related to what we call as a materialistic world today. And today is World Mental Health. Therefore, the thematic itself becomes important for UPSC, which is prioritizing mental health in the workspace. Now, it is not a coincidence, or it is very obvious that why are we talking about mental health and workspace. In the past 3 months, we have lost 3 to 4 very talented workers, or you would rather say very talented youth, to the work pressure, based pressure, stress and what we call as mental health issues. They have committed suicide because of the pressure which they felt in the workspace itself. So the idea is that workspace is one zone which is emerging as a problematic zone. From an accountant to an engineer, very bright students, after even clearing one of the most difficult examinations in India, they are facing a lot of mental health issues because of workspace pressures. Now, as a UPSC aspirant, mental health, stress, anxiety, depression is something which is part of the landscape. While people will talk about workspace-based mental health, there is one more selective amnesia which a lot of people have, which is the amount of stress which you go through, which is as a UPSC aspirant with multiple attempts and this whole 1-year process and the competitive nature of this examination. Mental health is something which we all have struggled with or are struggling with, or in a way are in the pursuit of that because of the fact that we are under a lot of pressure. You as an aspirant have a lot of pressure on you, and that is where this article quite is both enlightening for the examination, but something as an introspection for you also, because stress management and time management are 2 keys to this examination. Feeling demotivated, feeling depressed, you losing out the steam is something which happens to everybody, but everybody feels that they are the only one they are going through. This is something which I talk about in class, in my optional classes also, that you are not the only one who is maybe struggling with the syllabus or the fact that you're not able to manage your time well. The more you become conscious of it, the more stressed you feel, and therefore it creates a whole cycle, a vicious cycle of pressure. Now, the Lancet report which is used. Now, there are three parts. First is, what is the scale of this epidemic? The second part is that what are the reasons, causes for it? So, the scale, causes, and then the way forward. So, again, what I have done is I have tried to divide it into three parts, so that if you want to use it in the examination, you can use it in a very specific way of three different parts. So, when we talk about the scale, the Lancet report gives us a very scary picture with close to 197 million people in India itself suffering from either depression, anxiety, or something related to that substance abuse. And it is the economic pressures and intensified social pressures which creates this expectation, which in turn leads to the people to this basic path of mental health disorders. And therefore with developmental aspirations comes a lot of what we call as disconnection, and that in turn leads to no self-awareness or purpose. Now, I'll try to remove the jargonized English out of this, and I'll try to give you a more simplistic picture, but this is a data which can be used by us in an introduction. The idea is mental health is something which we all struggle with. Some people deny it, some people don't know it, and mental health disorders can be something which can impact all of us in a very big way. And therefore, let's understand why it happens. And this is again something which in a way I discuss when I teach Buddhism, Jainism, because Buddhism, Jainism, when they rose in 6th century BC, there was a certain type of materialism and moral degeneration which came through, which became one of the pretext on which Buddhism, Jainism came through. Ironically, the more the things change, they remain the same. We are somehow in that same type of consumerism, materialism today, that we have created very superficial definitions of things, which in turn leads to unrealistic expectations from the youth, from children, and even as adults, we face these issues. So, first is that it is an epidemic that is properly established. Mental health is not a joke. It is not that everybody is the same, everybody is different, everybody manages pressure in a different way, and therefore one size fit all approach is not going to work. Now, let's try to understand the causes. And please do understand this, that these causes in itself also give us the solutions, because if you look at and analyze the causes, you will then automatically understand the way forward. The first one is very simple and straightforward, which is pressure. Pressure from different spheres. These are the causes of the mental health epidemic in India today. You have pressure of urban life, of competition, and of financial instability. Now, what do you mean by this is even very interesting. See, the fact is that a lot of you, and what I am trying to do is I am trying to connect you with the topic so that you also are able to understand it and internalize it. We all have seen students and the whole ORN issue as it happened. A lot of students fiscally invest a lot in their preparation. They leave their hometowns, they are in an alien city, and urban sectors and a city like Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai or Bangalore also can push a lot of pressures on you, which you may have not felt within a familial space. So, urban life pressure creates context in which either you are under pressure for rent or for that lifestyle itself, or you are also pressurized by your peers and friends to embrace what is the superficial understanding of urban life, which may be light life, which may be drinking, which may be intoxication, which may be substance abuse. So, therefore, there is a certain lure. There is a certain lure that once you enter into a metropolitan city, there are certain pressures which come through, which if you are not able to manage, the idea that I don't fit in, the idea that I feel out of place is something which is created artificially, because what is urban life is not that superficial space, but something beyond it. Thereafter, you and every UPSC aspirant can understand competition. The pressure of competition, not just UPSC, be it NEET, be it JEE, be it any examination in India, from the small clerical positions in the railways to any given examination in India, competition is something which creates a lot of pressure from 5 to 6-year-old children to the age of 25, 26, 27. You do feel pressure, and that pressure in turn creates a lot of isolationist understanding within you, and your purpose and self-awareness goes away. Thereafter, there is also an angle of financial instability. This is more chronicle, or you can say a chronic reason for adult based depression or anxiety, where we all are in that zone where we think that is the money or whatever money we have, is it enough or not. Now here a subsidiary issue which compounds and creates bigger issues is social media. Because what social media is an artificial space of make-believe lifestyle and understanding. What social media does is, from Instagram to Meta to any other, from even very basic, you can say, social media based platforms, they all create this unrealistic expectation. So the idea is that a person may be in a lot of debt, but when they will project their life on Instagram, they will show it that they have the best life possible. There are multiple travel influencers who actually are in a lot of debt, but just to create content, they in turn are taking that debt and showing that they are living their best life. Ironically, behind every laughing face on social media, there's a person who is either under pressure of views, under pressure of likes, or under pressure for fiscal reasons. So therefore, each of these pressures, therefore, in a way are subsumed within the social media, but they project something which in turn induces that in you. So you would rather want to be a flashy chai wala than rather being an IAS officer or a doctor and engineer. The standards we are setting today is that education is not important. What is important is views. If you will do views, my social media earning is this, my social media earning in that, I earned this much in this month, and therefore we have created such role models in this society which basically go against the basic principle of what this country needs, and also over and above that what really mental health wants. They themselves are under pressure, but they will project that they have the best life. This is the artificial life of social media, which in turn compounds urban life, competition and fiscal instability in more ways. So they have it, they don't project it. By looking at them, you would start to emulate them, and this imitation game which you play in turn creates more and more pressure. This is not just for influencers. We have multiple forms of role models which talk about a lot of things sitting, and that is why the best video which works on any platform is a motivational video, because everybody is demotivated. That is where social media and pressure, this is what this article is trying to also create, that social media and pressure go hand in hand, and this is where we are creating a space in which mental health is considered to be something as a disease. It is a disorder, it is a disease, but we have to make it more common. We have to make it more naturalized, something which is day in, day out an epidemic, and everybody goes through those phases. Thereafter, another set of issues which causes this form of pressure and this idea is that we have consumerism, what is called as materialism, and adding to it with isolation in alien cities, it creates even bigger issues, which is that we somehow have equated that money equals to happiness. It may be something which looks like a romanticized understanding. This is basically what UPSC checks in ethics paper and in GS paper 4. Money equals to happiness is a very materialistic understanding of happiness and even life, and therefore the people pursue money, but what is ironical is they never get happiness. It may sound to be very, very cliched that money cannot buy happiness, but the idea is that the more you go into the lives of people with a lot of money, you will realize more and more that either they are isolated or they're lonely, or what they have are superficial people around them. So in isolated alien cities, there are people with a lot of money. You will always have a lot of friends around you, but are those friends real friends is a bigger question. And this is where the capitalistic consumerism comes through, which is that we tend to show power, show happiness through consuming. The more I will consume luxury items, the more I will be happy, and therefore the people will therefore understand that. So the chain basically is that we all chase money and wealth, therefore we link our wealth to social validation, and from that social validation we believe that it will bring us happiness, that we will feel more and more happy the more accepted we will be in the social society. But what happens is the self-awareness and the idea of purpose is in turn lost. A lot of people do things which they don't want to do, that is not their purpose, but they do it because they are doing it for social validation. This is where the fourth concept comes in, which is societal pressure and the norms of success. We define success in either terms of money or in terms of power, and therefore if you don't have power you have to have money, if you don't have money you have to have power. And this is where the idea is that you could be an ISRO scientist, but you will never get the respect in the society you deserve as for contributing to this nation, but you will get a respect either as a random person. And I really don't want to take here names. You would have seen multiple Instagram posts of a person who somehow served tea to a very, very known, you can say MNC CEO or founder. Thereafter he's been called across the world somewhere or the other, and now we've created a certain aspect that because he did this, therefore he gets this, and therefore success is this only. So the aspects of success or the definition of success itself has now become distorted, and this is where there's nothing which this article has, and this is not my understanding, this is what the article is arguing. There's nothing against the social media aspect. Social media connects, but what is the irony is that this connection is in turn also coming with a lot of isolation. The more we are getting connected, the lesser we have any human contact, and therefore we all feel lonely and disconnected. And this is where we have created a definition of success which is very superficial, and all of this compounds and creates mental health issues. So in an essay or even in an ethics answer, please do not go this route to answer that money is success, money is happiness. The definition of happiness is to know your purpose, to be self-aware, and to do something what you want to do. Now it's again very cliche to say do something what you want to do something which you have passion in, but the way we have defined success, the way we already have created a societal structure before we are born or after we are born, already our career is decided, and therefore we are churning out so many different professions. There are so many people doing the same thing that people who really want to do something are not able to do that. It's again quite a three idiots type of understanding, but the idea is this article argues that whatever is projected in different movies about mental health, the idea is societal pressure from competition, urban life and finances and social media, along with consumerism and materialism, where we have defined consumerism and materialism as success, is in turn leading to a lot of mental health issues. So this is the second part. The first part was to understand the scale. The second was to understand the cause. Now comes the issue with regards to way forward. How do we come out of this understanding? This is where this article gives you a lot of points, but they again seem to be quite far-fetched because we think in that space itself. Now this is something which I discuss in class when I teach world history. When I teach industrial revolution and social impact, I discuss something called industrial consciousness. I'll not go into the concept of time, that's a separate issue altogether, but there's something called industrial consciousness. It was a product of the industrial revolution in the 1780s and thereafter the 1800s. See, what is industrial consciousness would explain most of these things. What is industrial consciousness is basically the concept of being isolated. I give you a very simple example, you'll understand it. Next time when you go into a bus, metro or any public transportation, notice how many people have either some form of lead or some form of you can say earphones or headphones on their ears, and how they stand there but they aren't there itself, which is, this is called industrial consciousness. See, before the industrial revolution, when the steam engine did not come through, when transportation was not quick, you had to travel with people across days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. Now in a 3 to 4 day journey, you can't just sit there, not say anything and not interact with the person who's sitting in front of you. So the idea was that you have human interaction, you learn about them, you tell your journey, people interact, relationships are built. However, what the industrial revolution did was it revolutionized transportation, and now I can reach from point A to point B, which used to take 3 days, now only within 3 hours. Now that creates what is called as industrial consciousness. Industrial consciousness is that I now don't need to interact with people, and therefore what we do is we close ourselves. So in the same metro, you will see people dying of a heart attack, but people will not care because they believe that they are a single entity. They've closed themselves to the noises which are coming from outside. They don't really care what is happening. They don't have what is called as self-awareness. This is called being self-aware, which is to look around, to see, to interact to, and what we've created is, and this is a very American thing to say, is if you really do try to interact with somebody on a public transportation, it turns out to be creepy or turns out to be too very problematic. That how did he expect me to reply to this? This is where we have internalized this industrial consciousness, where we try to, in a way, think that we are one single entity. We are now doing it in the familial space, father, mother, children sitting in the same room with their phones, on the same table with their phones. Everybody is in their own space. Ironically, the more they are connected in their own spaces on social media, the less they are connected as a human, and therefore that creates loneliness. So a lot of times children are and even adolescents are not able to communicate to their parents that they're going through a lot, and that is where we have created a communication deficit. We have created an epidemic where we are not able to communicate our feelings. And this is where the way forward comes in, that we have to change our way of understanding what is success, what is communication, what is human contact. So again, the idea is I'll give you 4 to 5 points which are given in the article, but very high-fi points they are, will not make sense in the more pragmatic, practical sense, but to write an answer they will suffice. Now the first is going to be the concept of individual success to be understood as something called community well-being. Now this is where this article becomes a little bit problematic, because how do you define community well-being? And in a society where we live in, if a community goes forward, still the pressure on the individual remains. And therefore this idea that community well-being is important, sure, but only in theory. Thereafter, we have to create more channels of communication, of social interaction, but this has to be physical. This has to be physical. It cannot be a digital space. And that is why the mental health issues became even more in COVID-19 period. When people became confined to their houses and they had no social interaction, they became even more vulnerable to these issues. And that is where this whole idea comes through. Third has to be workplace regulation. Workplace regulation. You would have recently, or you would be privy to a lot of the debates which are happening, ironically only among CEOs, on how many hours should be there, or it should be a 70-hour or a 50-hour or a 40-hour, this and that. The irony of the story is that somehow there is an expectation that because it is their company, so the worker should also think that it is their company. So if they put in 100 hours, and if they expect a worker to also put in 100 hours, that is where again capitalistic mindset comes through, that there is they believe that the more you work, the happier you will become, and therefore the more self, you can say, aware and satisfied you will become. With no incentives, with no forms of, you can say, even workplace culture, toxicity is becoming a problem. Workplace regulation, hourly regulations is important. Recently itself, people said that the people who work till 3 a.m. come to office at 1 p.m. That is not the privilege which everybody has. And that is where you have to understand that workplace regulation and workplace stress has become the biggest issue nowadays. The single most important cause for stress and anxiety and depression today is workplace stress or toxic work culture. Now there's again some person who is apparently a shark or used to be a shark on Shark Tank, believe that the companies which work, they always have a toxic workplace culture. So the best working places or the best working companies, there's a prerequisite that the toxic work culture helps. This is again an absurd proposition. Which means that if you will keep fear as a factor, if you will create a certain, you can say, a sword of punitive aspects of penalties as the incentive, people will work better. Sure, in the short term it will work, in the long term it will never work. So the idea is workplace regulation, be it governmental or at least an introspection by the people who are working, there needs to be workplace regulation, and this is one of the biggest issues which we are seeing today. Again, this article is only one voice, I am giving you that voice, a lot of different, you can say, opinions, you may differ in this, there may be a different understanding in that regard. There is a space for everybody's opinion here, and therefore there is no right opinion. It's just that in the examination, if the tone of the question is in a way a little bit towards mental health and not towards this capitalistic mindset, you have to write things which tells you something like that. So I'm telling you, there can be both type of questions. In one question, it could be that you have to support the aspect that this is all just big words, and the other could be that workplace regulation, individual success, these things need to be redefined. Thereafter, we have to change the definition of happiness. Happiness cannot be equal to, can be equal to money, and more than that, we cannot define happiness also in the way of buying ability. Buying ability would mean basically the concept of purchasing power. The more I can buy, the more happy I am. That is technically not true, but sure. The idea is we have to change. Again, this has to be disassociated, which is happiness is money, money is happiness. This is where the Buddhist thought also comes through, that it is desire that is the Ashtang Marg, in that sense, that it is desire that is the genesis of all forms of dukkha or concepts of sorrow, and it is when desire goes away that you get the form of happiness, which would in turn lead you to the right path, the eightfold path, which in turn would lead you to moksha. But that is again a different understanding with regards to afterlife. But the idea is we have to disassociate these things in that sense, and we have to rethink our definition of success, and that is something which can come as a question like this. This can be a question in ethics also. It could be an essay question also. Nowadays UPSC asks very philosophical essay questions. India is currently amidst a mental health epidemic, and there is a need to rethink our meaning of success. Comment. They can also ask you this in a reverse manner, that is happiness equals to money, or is the purchasing power of a person directly proportional to the happiness of that person. Now you personally could have a different understanding, and that is where you have to understand that stress management, time management is key to this examination, and taking a half-hour break to listen to some songs is not going to kill you or is not a crime. That is where the concept of industrial time comes through. Some way we will have a conversation about that also. With this, we move to the second article, something related to workers in that regard, which is the Samsung issue. Now, as of right now, just last night there was the arrest of at least 3 to 4 the workers, leaders of the Samsung union which has been formed. But the Samsung India Workers Union, the SIWU, is actually not recognized. Now, the idea is close to 2/3 of the 1800 workers which are in Chennai in the South Korean company called Samsung, everybody knows about it. They are fighting for higher wages, 8-hour work day, better working conditions, and more than that, their recognition of their own trade union. Now, trade unionism, workers' association, Soviets if you want to call them, are something new. Soviet is a Russian word for a trade union. The fact of the matter is, this company, Samsung, has a very interesting past, or you can say an interesting story behind how they treat their workers. And this is where this article becomes interesting. We will discuss two aspects here. What is the track record of Samsung with trade unions? And second is, why do they want recognition for their trade union? This is where the Trade Union Act comes in, and therefore an aspect of prelims. The first things first is that Samsung, since its 80 years of existence, has very straightforward a no trade union policy or no union policy, something which Amazon is also holding on to in that regard quite a lot. And it was only in 2021 that in South Korea, the Samsung display workers were able to unionize themselves, and the Samsung electronic workers were again able to unionize themselves and got a 4.5% wage revision. And since then, only in the recent past, with multiple legal challenges also coming to Samsung over the no union policy, they have started to in a way recognize unions. Now, Samsung is a business conglomerate. It is a family run business. All Samsung family members as of right now have been accused of embezzlement, of money laundering, and the president of South Korea actually gave them a pardon because close to 15 to 16% of their GDP comes out of the Samsung corporation itself. And in that sense, the Samsung family itself is very, very important to the South Korean government, and therefore they have accepted a lot of things which may not have been accepted in this day and age with regards to no union policy. Same is true for what Bezos is doing with Amazon, where unionism is now becoming a problem. America's biggest issue is trade unionism, a very anti-trade union communist understanding nation with very shallow understanding of the left. But the idea of the fact is Samsung has been getting away with a lot of things. In India, the Chennai plant, they have a track record of very long working hours, very bad conditions. In certain cases, even bathroom breaks are not being given, and that is quite problematic in that regard. And they are asking for higher wages, commensurate or at least linked up with the what is the inflation rates today in that regard. Now, the biggest demand is this recognition of the Samsung India Workers Union, and the reason why they are asking for it is because under the Trade Unions Act, they get certain privileges. Now, the privileges is out of the whole Trade Union Act, Section 16, Section 17, 18 and 19 are four very important sections of the TU Act. And under Section 16, they basically can set up a fund, a trade union fund, which can be subscribed by the different, you can say, workers and the union leaders, and this can be used for welfare. And welfare also brings us to a very, very sad news which came last night with one of the biggest gems and the most towering figure in the MNC space and company space in India. Ratan Tata passed away yesterday, and he is an epitome of this example, wherein Tata workers are considered to be the best, you can say, well kept, well maintained, and workers' welfare has always been something which is a Tata ethic. And therefore, the idea is that from the trade, what is happening in Samsung, the Samsung company should take out a page out of the Tata Corporation and the ideal set by Ratan Tata himself, wherein that workers' welfare is important. And at a given point of time in India today, after government service, a Tata service is considered the most secure, the best, with a lot of different privileges which the workers get. And it's not that, and this is where that toxic work culture comes through also, the argument which a random pay person has given that toxic work culture equals to the best companies, that is the biggest example against this is Tata. Tata is one of the most successful companies in India in that regard, and they are known for the best work culture in India. And this is where Samsung should in a way accept the trade union, because trade unionism is not bad. There are within all Tata institutions, there are workers unions. Worker unions can be a way of expressing the grievances of the workers, and that keep the worker is happy, the factory is going to run the right way. So therefore, trade union fund can be set up under welfare, for welfare activities under section 16. But what is more important is, this is where the legal aspect comes in. Under section 17, 18 and 19, a trade union worker and a trade union leader gets immunity from certain criminal, civil and contractual obligations. Now this is very important, specifically previously IPC 120, which is criminal conspiracy. See, if they are organizing a strike, there is an aspect of planning. Now if SIWU is not accepted as or recognized as a trade union, then the leaders can be prosecuted over criminal conspiracy against the Samsung Corporation. However, if you are a recognized trade union, the criminal conspiracy section cannot be pushed in. Same way, because you are asking workers to sit without working, you are asking them to breach their contract, and therefore contractual obligations are also in a way wavered. So this is where this immunity from civil and criminal action during strikes and the collective bargaining capacity of a trade union is something which has been talked about, and that is why Samsung is looking for it. Remember one thing, that trade unions are the most important tool for, and this is again an aspect of ethics, an aspect of GS paper 2 wherein governance comes through, and workers, which is the idea of trade unionism is about workers' welfare. And if workers' welfare is something which a company is seeking, recognizing a trade union, and what the article also argues is, there is no direct correlation between recognizing a trade union equals to disruption in workers, in disruption in work itself. And this is where the article actually gives you a counterpoint. Wherever there are trade unions and workers associations, those companies have a long-term better track record than any company where the workers are not happy. And this is where the means of production, which is the workers themselves, if they don't vent out their issues, then it will start to reflect in the corporation's quality, in their work and in their investment. And this is where this article becomes important, because it gives you an entry point. First is the TU Act aspect and the aspect related to trade unionism. Now you can get a question like this in the examination, which is, trade unions and workers associations are cornerstones of labor welfare. Comment. This is again a question which you can balance your aspects, that trade unionism is not just equal to radicalism within the workers, which will in turn lead to disruption of trade. It is an important way of interaction between the industrialist, or the, you can say, the owner or the company and its workers. A lot of companies don't allow this. Even when I was working on my MPhil, and within the bureaucratic space, in police, it is constitutionally mandated, and in the act itself, statutorily also mandated, that police men and any person who is related to the police cannot unionize. Now it makes sense maybe in that space, but in a private sector, it makes no sense. So there has been a very long discussion, a lot of discourse has happened over this, that can we have associations within, for example, paramilitary forces, within CISF, within the CRPF, within the policing systems in India. And this is where the original act, the Indian Police Act 1861, which is still today used, it directly says that unionism is not allowed. And ironically, when we talk about the structure which was produced statutorily or constitutionally, the idea is unionism, or you can say associations within constitutional bodies or even a statutory body, or when we talk about the bureaucratic mechanism, is not allowed. That is where that's a separate issue altogether, wherein we discuss the aspect of government and trade unionism. That is a separate issue, not relevant to you, but the ARC also talks about it, that how the welfare of the employee is equally important as much as, and that will keep the sanctity of the force itself. And this is where this aspect becomes quite important. Yesterday also we discussed something related to trade politics and trade unions. Again today with Hindu it will always happen. There were two articles, one on Vizag and the other one on Samsung. Vizag one was not relevant to us, but this one was relevant because of the larger TU Act which can now come in the examination. With this, let's transition to the third concept, which is the Monetary Policy Committee and the neutral stance which they have taken. Most probably Shamsa is also going to take a session on this in a more detailed fashion, but I will try to give you the larger understanding, what is the Monetary Policy Committee and what does this neutral mean. Now, the RBI on Wednesday has maintained the benchmark interest rate at 6.5% for the 10th consecutive MPC review, and it has now changed its stance to neutral. Now, first things first, let's not presume anything. What is monetary policy? Monetary policy is the policy followed by the central bank or the RBI to control money supply in India, which is monetary policy means how much money is circulating in the economy, because money supply and price stability are the two major tasks of the Monetary Policy Committee. Price stability and money supply, in a way implied. They will say price stability, but that basically means inflation targeting. Now, why is that money supply is important? Because in Keynesian form of economics, there is a correlation between money supply and inflation, which is that inflation, which is general price rise in the economy, in a certain space it is good, meaning some form of inflation is good, 4 to 6% is what the MPC decides. But the idea is inflation can be because of two major reasons. One is called demand side, the other one is supply side. So, supply pull inflation would be when there are supply chain bottlenecks and there may be issues which have come, there is a supply shock, and the idea is that if there is demand and supply, if there is more demand than supply, prices will go up. If there is more supply than demand, then prices will go down. So, the idea is that if there is a lot of money in the economy, when there is a lot of money supply in the economy, people now have more money in their hands. When they will have more money in their hands, demand will start to increase, or what is called in economic terms is consumption. Consumption will start to increase. So, demand will start to increase with no specific growth in economy. For example, if the supply side capacity was to produce 100 units and it remains to be 100 units, but the money supply starts to increase beyond exception in a hyperinflationary trend where it has gone to 300-400%, too much money is, or money has lost its value, demand will increase exponentially, and with supply side not changing, it will lead to price rise or general price rise over a period of time, which is inflation. Inflation can also be in different ways, from accommodative inflation to skewflation to the aspect of hyperinflation, which is what Germany saw after the First World War, 100, 200%, 300%, where money is basically useless. The idea is that controlling money supply controls the inflation, and do understand one thing, the more the money, the more the inflation, and that is what RBI tries to control through its stances. Now, there are different tools which the RBI uses as its monetary policy, you can say apparatus or monetary policy tools in that regard. You would have heard about them, for example, repo rate. Repo rate is at the interest rate at which the RBI would lend to a bank overnight in the short term. Reverse repo is exactly the opposite, which is that if a company, if a bank wants to park its funds with the RBI, how much interest it would give to the bank. Now, when for example, I'll give you a very simple example. If the RBI wants to increase money supply, it would reduce the repo rate. It would reduce the repo rate. So, lending would become very, very cheap. The banks will have more money and the people will also have money, because the banks should theoretically transfer the reduced repo rate as bank rate to the consumers. However, if they want to, you can say, flush out the money out of the economy, what they will do is they will increase reverse repo. which is they will make it from, for example, 6% to 10%, so that the banks would want their money to be parked with the RBI so that they get a better interest on it, and it sucks the money supply or money out of the economy. They also have what is called as CRR, cash reserve ratio. Then you would have heard about SLR, statutory liquidity ratio. Cash reserve ratio is that you have to keep a certain amount of money in the form of liquid assets. If the CRR is increased, that sucks the money out of the economy because the bank has to now keep a certain aspect in liquid cash. SLR is statutory liquidity ratio. Again, have to keep it in liquid. So therefore, in liquid form would mean that assets which can be sold quickly, and therefore again SLR would increase. That would in turn lead to the bank's lending capacity going away. Remember, RBI controls the bank rate, which is the rate at which you and me will get a loan. The lower the interest rate, the more people will take loans. The higher the interest rate, the less loans they will take. And therefore, by controlling reverse repo and repo, they technically control how the interest rates will go up and down, and that in turn will decide how inflationary targeting is done. Now, theoretically this is the case, but for the past 3 to 5 years we have seen that though the MPC and even the government of India have changed their stance, they have reduced the repo rate and even tried to make lending cheaper, the banks have rather not transferred it to the people. So they've taken the advantages. They are now trying to in a way flush out their non-performing assets, but in a pure sense, in a economic sense, the monetary policy tools should be able to control the money supply. This is where the MPC comes in under section 45ZB of the RBI Act of 1934, wherein they created a monetary policy committee which constitutes of 6 members. The RBI governor is ex officio, the deputy RBI governor is again ex officio, meaning that by virtue of holding that office he becomes a member of the MPC. One RBI officer nominated by the central board, again ex officio, and 3 experts which are appointed by the central government. Now these 3 experts and these 3 RBI officials, 6 members together, take a stance, meaning what is going to be our policy. As of right now, the article argues that, and the governor argues that we are in the right zone. Das has argued that we are in the exact sweet spot for what we call as inflation, but he is given a very interesting analogy. He believes that a horse called inflation was galloping. It has now been controlled by a leash. That leash is tight enough. However, if any form of wrong policy decisions is taken, maybe the leash will break and the horse can run away, wherein runaway inflation will become a problem. Now, why is inflation good? Because across the world is a recessionary trend, wherein see recession is not good, which is people want to produce but there is no demand. Supply more supply or supply constant and demand falling is not a good thing for the economy. Then the economy contracts. When the economy contracts, it can go into a deflationary spiral. That deflationary spiral is very hard to come out of. You can control inflation, but coming out of a deflationary spiral is very difficult. Which is, for example, you go into a deflationary spiral, you go into a recession. Demand is falling, supply remains the same. So therefore, the companies will start to cut down on production. When they will start to cut down on production, if production will be cut down, people will be laid off. When they will be laid off, they will be now having no income. When they will have no income, then they will not have money to spend. If they will have no money to spend, then demand will again fall further. When demand will fall further, that will in turn lead to the people getting more fired. Then demand will again go further down. So consumption goes down, people get fired, companies kept on reducing their production, and this spiral can go on to become something like the Great Depression or the recession which we saw in 2008. So this is where governmental spending comes through. The only way to come out of a deflationary spiral is government-based investment, public spending, which would in turn create jobs so that demand goes up and price rises, and therefore people have money to chase that, and therefore it is better to be in an inflationary cycle to be in a deflationary cycle. This is what the RBI governor is also arguing, and that is why now they have taken a stance which is called neutral. Now there are 3 major stances which the MPC takes. One is called accommodative. This is the third aspect of this article. The other one is called neutral, and the third one is called hawkish. Hawkish, based on a hawk. Now, accommodative means that they want to expand money supply, and in most cases they will cut the interest rates so that people can take credit from the banks, and therefore there will be more consumption. With more consumption there will be more demand, and therefore that will in turn lead to more and more money supply. So they have in a way opened the tap. Accommodative means opening the tap so that there is a little bit of flow. Neutral means that they neither have to cut or you can say increase the interest rates, and right now the money supply is in a sweet spot. Therefore, they don't want to play with the economy in that regard. This is the stance which they have taken. They believe that we are in the right 4.5-ish, you can say inflation, 4.5 to 5.5 it is right now, and they are arguing that 7.1% is going to be the GDP growth rate. Hawkish is exactly the opposite of accommodative. This is where inflation has started to come through, so they will increase the interest rates so as to stop the money supply. So accommodative would be to open the tap, hawkish would be to close the tap, and neutral would be that the flow right now is fine. So if there is a certain flow right now, that would be neutral if it is good enough. If you want to increase it, you go into an accommodative stance. If you want to decrease it, you go into a hawkish stance, which is hike the interest rates in that regard. So again, pure economics, but I hope that it did make sense that how money supply is related to inflation, and what does this MPC neutral mean. Neutral means that RBI governor is saying everything is perfectly fine right now. We don't want to play with the interest rates right now. So the 6.5% repo rate, bank rate is good enough as of right now. Okay, with this you can get a question like this. Balancing inflation and growth is one of the primary tasks of the MPC. Do you agree? Very standard GS paper 3 type question, but at least it will give you the opportunity to revise something like this. From this we move to the Cabinet Committee on Security approving two very important developments. First is the MQ-9B Reaper Guardian deal for 31 such drones to be taken from America has been given a go ahead, and we have also said that we will now develop 2 nuclear attack submarines under our own what we call as technology, indigenous construction of 2 nuclear attack submarines, and the HALE, which is called High Altitude Long Endurance 31 MQ-9B, have been approved. We already have what we call as Arihant. We have INS Arighat has been recently also commissioned, 2 nuclear submarines, 2 more will come through, but we also mostly lease these submarines from Russia. So the idea is, just to give you a little bit of more context, the MQ-9B Predator and Reaper and Guardian, all 3 known for their different services in that regard. This is one of the most successful drones of America used in Afghanistan beyond exception, and it can do from laser guided missiles to anti-tank missions to anti-ship operations to search and rescue to law enforcement to defense and counter air, and that way it is the most versatile and the most interesting of all the what we call as unmanned UAVs, as they called UAV drones available to India as of right now. And this 31 will be then further divided equally amongst the Army, Air Force and the Navy, and this could be a game changer for India, specifically for our counter-terrorism and for our coastal security in that regard. So MQ-9B, I have discussed this previously also in July it came through, but that was an in-principle approval. Now the Cabinet Committee on Security has also agreed. Thereafter, the other aspect is that what is called as the Arihant class fleet is now being expanded. We already have 2, which is Arihant and the Arighat. Now we will develop 2 more. They are considered to be the biggest deterrent and give us the best first use ability. Nuclear submarines are only limited by the crew, not by the submarine itself. With close to 80 megawatt nuclear pressurized water reactors under them, the submarine has the capability of remaining underwater for years, 2 to 3 years in that regard, if they had the supplies in that sense. We also have 3 to 4 different types of what we call as submarines. So INS Chakra, we will add 2 more here, which is nuclear attack submarines. The nuclear powered ballistic missile submarines, we already have 2, wherein the Agni missiles can be pushed in, and therefore they can be made into what is called as the K4 and the K15 Sagarika missiles, in that sense nuclear capable. But we already have 2 for ballistic missiles. We'll add 2 more for attack submarines. We already have Kalvari class, the Shishumarg and the Siddhunga, or with the Sindhu Ghosh class in that regard, together making 14 diesel electric, which is diesel engines with charge and electric battery, which is then used when they go underwater. So again, let's see what is going to be, are they going to be called Chakra class, or they will be a new class itself, because Chakra class is a commissioned nuclear attack submarine from Russia. So they will let's see what is the nomenclature they will give, but just to give you information about this and the MQ9B. Now this will go through, because the Cabinet Committee on Security has also given a go-ahead, a very important addition to our first strike capacity and anti-terrorism and surveillance aspects. With this, we go into 2 small but straightforward topics. First one is the 2024 Nobel Prize for Chemistry, which has been given to David Baker and Demis Hassabis and John Jumper for what is called as developing the concept of what we call as amino acid structures, which we use, protein structures prediction, and the protein design, which is quite important today for different forms of, you can say, vaccine plus different aspects related to even genetic based diseases. CRISPR-Cas9, the amino acid and protein structure concepts are very, very important. You don't have to go into the Nobel Prize version of it, but the idea is you have to remember their names for any PCS level examination. Very standard, straightforward question. 3 people have got it. Yesterday we discussed 2 for neuron based ANNs, as they're called, the ANN concept of physics based AI and machine learning. This time it has been protein based amino acids for Nobel Prize for chemistry. We will end this session with a little bit of a longish discussion about H5N1. Now H5N1 again is something which I have discussed previously on this platform in different capacities, and the bird flu, as it is called, or the avian flu as it is called, has now become from an epidemic to a pandemic, and now is becoming even bigger than what it is right now. It used to only affect poultry, and the way of transmission was from poultry to poultry, and either from poultry, bird flu used to go from poultry to humans through the concept of airways and touch and all. Now human cases have come from Mexico, have come from America, mild variety also, in which 1 person died and 2 people recovered. But bird flu was known between birds and humans. But this flu which is spreading, the H5N1 variant which is spreading right now, is such that it is impacting even mammals, and from dolphins to different forms of penguins to this spreading to Antarctica. There are multiple cases where this has become not just a bird flu, but a flu which is spreading across. It's like a COVID-19 type spread, and Australia and New Zealand as of right now are bracing for the arrival of the bird flu, because they are the destination of a lot of migratory birds during this season. And the fact is that from Asia to Europe to Africa, there have been multiple deaths of multiple mammals and birds, and this is the only part of the world which has not been affected by the bird flu till now. And therefore they are trying to make sure that there is some form of deterrence against it. But the idea is, with these 2 sectors being the only part which is left with no bird flu, and bird flu going till Antarctica, and a lot of migratory birds are going to come from the northern hemisphere, this is a very big issue. In every session I have pointed out that there needs to be a certain proper policy which has to be pushed in. No collective effort has come through, and with so much consumption of chicken, and because it affects cows also, and and cow milk has, you can say, the reminiscence of H5N1 flu, there is a lot of avian influenza based scare and effect on the dairy sector, the poultry sector, and on basic wildlife. There has been no protocol which has been pushed in, and now we are left with only 2 very far away continental masses, Australia and New Zealand, which will also become a part of this whole spectre. But because the birds there, indigenous varieties, have no form of immunity, or because this was the only zone which was not touched by bird flu, this may be more disastrous than previously seen. So this is something which is an ongoing concept. This 234.4b avian influenza H5N1 variety has become a major scare in the larger context. So before I end, 3 to 4 very important things. First, today is World Mental Health Day. Remember this point, remember the thematic, remember the things which have been talked about with vis-a-vis the ethics essay part related to it. Then something related to the concept of what we call as what is the TU Act, Trade Unions Act. Last but not the least, you have to discuss, you should know what is the MQ-9B predator drone or the Reaper, and over and above that you should also know that the H5N1 has now become much bigger than what it has been previously. What is equally important in this story is the fact that a lot of topics today give you a lot of fodder for essay paper. Essay, ethics, we have a lot of discussion. So I hope that you will also learn the names of the Chemistry Nobel Prize winners for any basic examination. UPSC is not going to ask you that, but basic examination, but part of the news landscape. With this, I would like to thank you all. Thank you so much. I will see you soon. Happy Dussehra to all of you if I don't meet you before it. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.